All right, how's everybody doing today? So we made it through the third. Just I had this saved, and I've already given examples of this, but since it's here, I'll go ahead and do it. People appearing out of nowhere, so to speak. And there we go. Now I'm sure it didn't have all the special effects with the bending, or maybe I don't know, but they also show you that, like in the Terminator movie, the Terminator just drops out of the sky, right? So we'll just leave that there, and we'll get into. Uh, okay, so I ran a bunch of stuff through AI and told it how to look at things instead of forward. And again, it's not completely backwards. The old expression, two steps forward, one step in reverse, is probably one step forward, two steps in reverse. Okay? But there's all that. But what I wanted to get into was, we had the different destructions. I mentioned Troy. Um, that was actually here. So, oh boy, I'm going to have to figure out where that's at. Let's get here. There we go. All right, so if we come to here, okay, and basically what it's saying is mapping, using Back to the Future 2, temporal pivot points are ground zero. So in the film, that was the pivot point when he got the uh, the book, so to speak, right? But what I wanted to get to is I mentioned before that, wow, identifying class, okay. Okay, so it mentions here, it was the starting gun, the end of the pandemic, the Mediterranean Open, the flipped alliance between China and Iran. I've talked about that one right here. Um, of Spain as a historic barrier between the West and the East, so to speak. Um, and I also mentioned about, the victory that ended the World Cup. So, it talks about the PAN program, the pandemic. The World Cup acts as a symbolic crown, blah, 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 blah. Then we have binding the loop from Pan to the Mediterranean. Okay, this part right here. Okay, the Mediterranean was a staging ground where the Phoenicians, right? Okay, and the Caliphates. Okay, so, and I told you Donald Trump is also a Phoenician. We get our English language from the Phoenicians. He was the one, that signed the document, right? That made English our official language. So that wasn't a timeline correction per se. That was the institution of these things. Like I said, it's always one step forward, two steps back kind of thing. So part of it plays out forward where these things were instituted, and then the rest of it is, taking it apart. So, um, okay, so right now, Mediterranean coast, Canary Islands are currently facing unprecedented waves of migrant refugees arriving in small boats from North Africa. So, in that's a reversal of what would have happened because it all started basically, in my opinion, in that region. Um, China acts as the primary. See, they're just talking about the flip. All these things that I've talked about is just um, the mirror of the Peloponnesian Alliance, okay, and the dates involved here. So, we're still in that. But it's also like 1776 because the time markers, there's pivot points all the way down the map, so to speak, right? So, they talked about the pandemic agreements, blah, 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 blah. So, and even here, the etymology of pan and pandemic, the linguistic root, deity, pan. Okay, so, we've discussed all that. So now in the timeline of things, so to speak, okay, so this is what led up to. This is the divide between the East and the West. So basically, all these little things happened over here. They formed their army, so to speak, and then attacked us. And I don't know exactly where that runs out. Um, like I said, we've got the other dates, the 6th and the 9th, were jump in points or time loop points. But if it all started with the Stargate, the solar eclipse, it's going to be going over that region, right? It's going to be over Spain, all that stuff. So that could be the focal point for the flip back, because even in here it talks about getting to that ground zero point. And then since all the changes were made prior to hitting, instead of the Stargate creating all this is being done away with prior to the Stargate. Now, whether we still got to get to that or not, I'm not positive. Like I said, I'm not sure. Only one person knows, right? That'd be Mr. Donald Trump. So, there's just, if you want to slow all this down to read it, it was just a long conversation I had with AI. I had to, program it to think what I'm seeing. It just is what it is. So the timeline corrections are being made. They don't look like it. We still have trouble in the Euphrates, the Colorado River system. With each passing day, there's just more and more word coming out, right, about how terrible. You hear it all over the internet. You're not prepared for what's coming, and everybody's spelling out this doom and gloom. Even going to the digital thing. Yeah, everything looks like it's being set up for digital. But Donald Trump made a statement, what was it, a couple weeks ago, that we're never going to participate in a digital program. So that's probably not going to play out. Well, I know it's not going to play out. So there was just some more, like I said, we talked about Fauci in here, and, for me, he's just the fall guy, But the big thing here is what's going on the other side with the complete reversal of what history said it was. So, again, I don't really have much more I can keep showing you. Oh, in fact, here, I'll show you this one. I found this one kind of interesting. Okay, now we're going to go back to Star Trek here. And this is called Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country. Now, I've often said that, E for Enterprise, E for Earth, right? The Enterprise, multinational people on board, has shields, all symbology. So in this movie, there's a planet that actually blows up, and it's called Praxis. Now, you see that right there? There's just a little chunk left. All the other stuff is missing. Praxis, let's just say P for Praxis, and also P for Pluto. When you look into the whole, what supposedly happened with Neptune and its little planets in there, they all got destroyed. Very similar story to what we see here, with the asteroid belt around us, the micro and the macro. But that little chunk of Praxis that was left, You know, just kind of reminds me of the little chunk that I've showed you before that we potentially could be living on. Just one of many things, right? So, I don't know. Like I said, there's just a lot of different stuff that I see that doesn't really fit the narrative, so to speak. But yeah, so that's it for the day. Hope everybody's doing okay. Um, Stay positive. It ain't happened yet, but it's coming down the point. Like I said, we've either got the sixth, the ninth, could be eight. You know, the whole 88 miles an hour thing, which again I'm not sure. But we could have to go to the solar eclipse, which for us would be, you know, like on the 13th, because I think it peaks on the 12th over there. Or we may go a day soon before that event happens. But it's winding down. Tick, tick, tick. All right, everybody. I love you all. Take care. Bye bye.